Welcome back to another episode of The Real Teachers of Atlanta. Remember, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and we're also on Threads. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about students and their reading and lack thereof ability to read. Let's talk about it.
We got the queens in the house, y'all. Real teachers of Atlanta.
Hi, I'm Mrs. P. Smith, the Mama Bear at school, your favorite ELA and SPED teacher, but always teaching my students about business.
I'm Miss Rose, commonly known as the snarky teacher, always ready with the good candy. The kids say I'm their favorite math teacher.
After school, it's lights, camera, action. During school hours, it's Miss Carter, the life science teacher saving lives.
We got the queens in the house, y'all. Real teachers of Atlanta.
Students are struggling with reading.
Yep.
Why is that?
Good question. That's the number one question.
Okay.
As an ELA teacher, I don't know.
Here you go. Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunately sad because it makes life for me very difficult. Not only language arts, but reading is in every subject.
Yep.
And I think we need to fix the problem and not put a Band-Aid on it. A lot of people want to blame No Child Left Behind. I don't know if that's the case. Probably, maybe part of it. I do understand the fundamental backing of that act. But our kids are being left behind.
So let's talk about No Child Left Behind, because that's what you brought up. So what was the purpose of No Child Left Behind? Because when I was in school, that was something that they pushed for students. They wanted all children to be successful, no matter if they failed or not. They wanted every child to be able to push through, and then hopefully they will get it in the next grade. But I think what's happening now is that a lot of students, they're not able to read because they miss those foundations. So
I think the true initiative behind the act is not so much of wanting everybody to not be left behind, but I think with that, they wanted everybody to be educated, no matter where you live, no matter your race, no matter if you come from inner school or want everybody to be on the same playing field. That was the purpose of No Kids Left Behind. George Bush probably needed something to do as well. But that was the primary focus.
Okay. That makes sense.
I don't think that it's a No Child Left Behind. I think that how it's been applied in schools and districts, because a lot of times you remember that the districts are making these decisions. So not every district is doing. It's not even where we're saying, okay, well, these kids aren't passing these number of things, so therefore they don't move on to the next grade. It's really holding. It's more so trying to hold the kids accountable and saying, okay, if you haven't met whatever standard, then you can't go on. But then it feels like what's happening now is we're seeing the standards get looser and looser and the expectations getting lower. But I honestly think that the problem with students and their ability to read is not just a public education or education problem, but it starts at home, where I feel like you're starting to see that with the kids that we are teaching, because a lot of their parents, aren't reading to them or aren't introducing books. There's fewer and fewer books in the homes. There, fewer and fewer, even public libraries are closing in some areas because they're just not being used. So kids aren't having ready access to words and language. And I feel like with more and more technology that they have access to, parents because I did it too, gave my kids iPad, okay, go sit down, chill, right? But my kids also both have tons of books in their rooms that they read all the time. So you have to have some balance. So I feel like what's happening is, now we got the Mickey Mouse reading club and stuff like that, but it's still all digital.
They still got Mickey Mouse reading club?
Yeah. They have little apps that teach your child to read and, reading, getting your kids to read. Like, that's why the reading is a big business, because fewer kids are doing it. They're just not doing it at a level that would make sense for school, because even in math classes, I mean, if it's reading, it's the comprehending what you read.
Mm-hmm.
All of those, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So they can't do the math problem if they don't understand what the words mean that they're reading.
Yeah,
So
I remember growing up, they had Hooked on Phonics.
mm-hmm.
They had a lot of different, reading programs for children. But I think now, we live in a digital age. It's the age of AI and tablets and computers. So people aren't really going to the libraries and the bookstores. And so when I, throughout my teaching career, when I have sat with children and they're not able to read and they're in the 7th grade or they're in the 8th grade reading on a 3rd grade level,
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering at what point did someone not see the problem? Did we not know how to address the problem? How are you this old and you cannot read, at all? That's troubling to me.
2nd grade is very critical to how a student is going to read. Like, if you haven't gotten past the 2nd grade reading level,
Mm-hmm.
we're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of your sight words happen K through 2, right?
Okay.
And so statistics show that when kids get to 4th grade, I don't know, something happens. Something is happening between that time, because in 4th grade, that's when the real struggles begin. You have children that cannot read. And just to go back to what you were saying about phonics,
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I'm not an elementary school teacher. I would like to sit down and talk with elementary school, preferably on the reading portion,
Right.
because they do have reading. I think it's not considered ELA in elementary school, but I would like to know, are they teaching phonics? Because I did teach 2nd and 3rd grade once, not very long. Definitely wasn't for me. But the curriculum that they used was very, I think was very advanced. They used the Abeka curriculum. I think that's a great curriculum. But
Now, can you talk about what that curriculum is?
So the Abeka curriculum, it still teaches cursive writing.
Oh.
When we talk about language arts or reading, it makes kids learn phonics.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have students, I'm a middle school teacher, and I have students that do not have any phonetical awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad, because at least if you can call out a word, you can at least sound it out if you don't know how to spell it.
Right.
They have no recognition of this sound, so they can't even write the word. And I'm talking about simple words, very simple words.
Do you have an example?
Joy, simple word, things that such as cake. I mean, our students are low, and and we can blame the parents. We can blame the districts. I think it's ultimately all of our issue.
Yeah.
When a child can read, we're saying that the parents are not helping the kids read. Well, like you said, it's more than putting a book in front of a kid's face. A kid needs to know how to break that book down. They need to know how to comprehend. They need to know how to look at characters. They need to know, the elements of the story, not just on reading. What are you reading for? They need to know all those standards when it comes to reading. And unfortunately, some of our parents don't know how to read. So there is a gap when it comes to educating their children, because statistics show as well that 54% of adults literacy is lower than the 6th grade. Mm-hmm. So how are they teaching their kids?
They can't.
I mean, you can't. Like I taught 3rd grade for almost a year. And again, not for me either, but we used Lucy Culkin's program for literacy. So what the district that I worked in, it was kind of just called language arts, but the day for an elementary student, you're just in the same classroom with your students, and it's just, we have an hour for this, an hour for that, an hour for this, an hour for that. It was very writing heavy. Mm-hmm. So the curriculum that we're using for them to read was actually there would be units, and I kid you not, it was write a short story, The next day, rewrite the same short story. The next day, okay, rewrite the rewrite. It was literally just write. It was very little reading elements. And then we would test their reading knowledge. But how can you write well if you can't read? Like, what do you write if you can't read it, right? If you haven't. So it was a struggle for a lot of my students. And it was frustrating. A lot of the teachers that I was working with at the time also were very frustrated. You can find the reviews on the program. And then now there's the whole science of reading where they're starting to bring phonics back, where they're saying, okay, because now Lucy Colkins is, awful, and everybody's saying, okay, now we know it's bad, but that was how many years ago that I was doing that? So we're all those kids are going to high school or in high school, so it's too late for them to get what they needed in the second, third grade because they were using that. The science of reading, supposedly, I have not used it, so I can't speak on this personally, but what I've read about it and when I've read like the program, what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to focus on more about the phonics and things, but I still feel like if you look from grade level to grade level, it still misses some of the core things that even we're identifying is like being able to pull apart the pieces of a word and being able to sound a word out and like use context clues to figure out what this word means. It's starting to go there, but it's missing, in my opinion, some of those components at an early enough age. So I feel like it's more like fourth grade when we're starting to do that, when really I feel like we were doing that in first, second grade, like when we were growing up, for me. So I think it's still missing some pieces.
You learn your sight words. I mean, like I said, K through second. It's very important that they have that phonetical awareness because you got to know what a long E, a short A, a long A. Like you have to know what sounds your vowels make. And our kids don't know that nowadays. I don't know what is going on. The No Kid Left Behind it wasn't a district thing. This is your government. Your state is making these laws. And they're focusing on these standardized tests, which we talked about before. They're not allowing children to make critical decisions. We're in class in let's keep it funky. The No Left Behind focus on reading and math, where you pushing all these other subjects out saying you need to learn about it.
Right. And I do science. So that's a subject that a lot of people say isn't important. But there's a lot of critical thinking components in science. So for me, that's of course they have to learn about the different parts of science, whatever subject that might be, whether it's physical science or earth science or life science. But it's, can you critically think? And you can't critically think if you cannot read. So going back to the district test that we have to take, where we are now held to a certain standard where we have to be held accountable. I mean, for the type of scores that the children have. Well, children can't read. They're not going to score well. So what do you want me to do about that part? Because I can't go back to the elementary school level because you don't want me to do that. But here I have a population of children that cannot read. They cannot identify their sight words, but you want them to take a district test.
Right.
That does not make any sense
at all.
And there's nothing that I can do about that.
There's nothing you can do about it. And the curriculum that hasn't changed, right? You're talking about kids cannot read, and then you got this curriculum that is antiquated. It's not for the whole student,
right?
And they cannot read it, right? And then it's much of these tests are targeted. Much of the curriculum is targeted so you can take these standardized tests. And so the teachers are in the classroom and they're focused more on, I need my test scores to be this certain number because their principal is putting a demand on them. The district is putting a demand on the principals.
That's right.
And the state is putting a demand on the districts. And nobody don't want to lose funding. And that's what happens.
So wait, say that part again.
No one wants to lose funding.
Hello.
So let's go to the next grade. And then, it's terrible because you're in there, you're doing, like we said, have these elaborate lesson plans.
Teaching till you're sweating.
Kids can't even read the directions.
I think
Am I
biggest
lying?
part-
they can't read the instructions.
They
I
can't
think
even read the instructions.
And if you have the instructions, what if you can't understand what to do? What am I supposed to do on number 4? Did you read the instructions? They can't read the instructions. I'm just trying to figure out, at the end of the day, I just want people to be honest. If it is about a number, if it's about money, then just say that, because we're not stupid. There are enough teachers that have been complaining about this forever. And going back to the standardized testing, you want to hold us accountable to the data. The data. Are we moving a kid? I can't move them if they can't read. Reading is the foundation for everything. Like Nikki said, or one of you all said it. It's the foundation for every single subject.
Yes, it
if
is.
you don't know what to do, you can't complete the assignment.
So you have to back up. So I want to back up to what Ty's saying. So yes, there is pressure from everywhere, but you got to remember how we got to that pressure. We can't even, when we go, so organized, let's just go to organized sports. I'll use that as an example. When you go to the game, at the end, there's no loser. Everybody get a trophy because you get your participation award. You showed up, you still won. Even though your team lost, or you suck, or you the water boy, you getting a trophy because you was on the team. Why? Because my mama paid her money and the trophy is part of the money. So everyone's getting an award. The worst kid on the kid that didn't practice, the kid that thrived. So the person at the bottom, let's say, and the person at the top, everybody gets an award. And the same thing, that same concept has now been applied to education, where parents I don't want my kid to, I don't want you to hold my kid back. I've had parents say that to me. I had a student in my class who could not spell his own name, was still moved to the next grade because his mother said to me and to the principal, when I said, hey, all school year, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, he still was moved. She was doing his homework, admitted it in writing that she was doing it. She was trying to do all the things for, but I had it in writing. She was saying, I'm doing this to help him. I'm helping him. And the work that was being turned in that she's helping with also wasn't up to par. So she wasn't doing good either. Oh, wow. But he can't spell his name, still goes to the next grade. My thing is, how does he get what somebody who worked their butt off, know what they was doing, all this other stuff?
I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna answer that question. So when he becomes an adult, life is going to categorize that person,
and that's the same thing I said.
Life is going to do it.
That's the same thing.
Because if you can't read, you can't get a job. You can't fill out an application. You can't do what you're supposed to do. Life will categorize that child or that adult person, because, like I said, if you can't read the application, if you don't, there's no way that you can apply for a job that's going to be able to give you some type of living where you can make a career for yourself, where you can have a legacy. So yes, while we're passing these children along because, maybe the district says we can't have so many retained students, life is going to be the one to kind of show them.
I often wonder I wonder. I feel like I know the answer, but I'll just say it. So when we start to talk about reading and the scores and where these things are taking place and who's impacted, I also think about like what we talk about, the school to prison pipeline. Because if you can't, because to your point, if you can't read, and I'm not saying like you don't recognize I, A, B, whatever, but just you're not where you need to be. If you're on a first and second grade level, there's just really not anything in any industry that you're going to be able to do at a first and second grade level and read and do that job well, right? So you're just going to get out there, you're going to graduate high school because we're just going to keep passing you along. Then where do you go? You can't work. You can't work, you can't eat. So now it's just survival mode. And we already know what happens with that. So now we're just going from trying to be in survival mode to going to, I feel like that's just feeding that same system. I feel like we're doing this because I feel like it's always, when you hear about it, it's always in areas that are Black and brown minority areas primarily.
Yeah, and then you end up having a life of crime because then again, if you're not able to have any type of career or a job, you can be stealing out of stores.
Yeah. So it's
robbing
a setup.
banks.
Not stealing out the store.
Stealing out the store.
Yeah, you gotta eat.
robbing banks.
So it's
scamming,
a setup. So it's a setup. If it almost
Credit
feels like
card
it's organized,
scams.
right?
Stealing numbers.
Right.
And that you look, listen, to be a person that I'm trying to figure out how to say this.
Go ahead, say it.
I feel like I say that every episode, right? I gotta kind of figure out how to say something. If you are a scammer or do any type of life of crime, you're actually not a dumb person.
No.
Because you have to figure out how to move numbers around, how to, finagle the system. So it's just about putting that energy into some place that's positive,
Yeah.
Well, I think we're doing a little stereotyping because let me tell you something. I have known NAM scammer that can't read and
There you
write.
go. Like, give it. There you go.
Baby.
You're right about that now.
They
Now you might
so
be stealing out
smart.
of-
Then let's correct you
Yeah.
on that.
Okay, correct.
That's blue collar crime. They know how to do that.
Okay.
I
That's the
work
stealing
for
at
the
the
federal
store.
government, baby.
Lord.
So let me correct you on that. But let's get back to these parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we not letting y'all off the hook. Every time y'all come to curriculum night, every time y'all get on there for the meeting, we tell y'all, as a language arts teacher, have your child reading at least 15, 20 minutes at night. We send an email home for homework, 15, 20 minutes. If your kid don't like picking up a hardback, we have Epic Reading. We have other ed tech websites your child can read and learn and get comprehension questions after they read. Or you can make them write a summary on what they have read. I have given all these suggestions.
No reading.
No homework.
None.
Parents-
I know you ain't reading.
You know what's funny is like I
They're
don't
not
like
doing
to
it.
read
Huh?
for.
I was just saying that they're not doing it.
Oh no,
doing it.
But
but
parents aren't pushing it. Is
And
what
then
I'm
because
saying.
you can check the times on you
yeah,
can check
you can
the
check the time.
assignments.
Yeah,
Even you send a log home.
but
Old fashioned way.
So is it that the parents just aren't pushing it, or is
They
it that
ain't doing it.
who
No,
the parents?
The parents
Well, there has to
and
be
the
a sense of
children not reading
accountability.
either.
That's it.
But then you know your child. You know your child. Let me tell you something. You know when your child can and cannot read. My child was a good reader because that's what I enforced.
There you
Because
go.
if the bare minimum, you got to know how to count money and you got to know how to read.
That's
So
it.
so it goes back to the parents.
That's
There's a sense of responsibility there.
that is a responsibility on their part. But what
Right.
I'm saying is, okay, we can't afford tutoring services. Some schools don't have the free tutoring. Oh, we can't afford tutoring service, but you come in sharp.
It's about where
Got the
your
latest outfit
priorities
on.
are. It's about where your
Yeah.
priorities
New
are, because you
shoes.
pay for cable. You pay for cable.
I mean,
It's about where it goes back to.
Joy.
So I forgot what I was about to say. Anyway, I'm just gonna move on from that.
I was just gonna say that I know for me, I'm not one of those people who likes to read like stories, but I would go read something if I thought I was going to learn something new or going to try to figure out how to do something. So I feel like, because another part, like I've heard parents say, because I was saying the same thing even in math class. If you just go read, just read a little bit. This math thing will be a lot better, because the problem isn't that you don't know the numbers. The problem, because if I give you just numbers, you can figure it out. But if I put this same problem in some word form, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So it's not that. Please go read something, anything. But these kids want to know how to play these video games. Guess what? They got whole forums. They can go read how to get the cheat code. They can figure that out. That's still reading and understanding. If whatever they interested in, there is a book or some resource with words that they can access it. So we can't say, oh, they don't like to read. No, because they read when they want to figure something. They want to know something. So figure it out. I feel like as a parent, we gotta figure it out. Because like my son, that's how he is. He's more like his mama, where he's like, I'm not reading this story. But I started with, just go read something that's fun to you. Or you want to know something? Fine. So now he reading coding books. Now he learning how to do it. Now all the other stuff is starting to be entertaining. But we ain't got no reading problems.
So with I don't teach ELA, but what I'm noticing is that with some schools, the students don't like the books.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the books that the students are being forced to read, or is it just... Okay, well, let me ask this. Do ELA teachers get to choose the types of books for their specific demographic of students, for their interests?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So that's what I say. It goes back to the curriculum.
Okay.
It depends on, for me, when I was in private, I don't have the statistics, but I would say I think when it comes to reading. I think private schools are blowing charter and public out the park. One, there's not we don't in private. You're flexible. You know, you could teach how you want to get in that class and teach. For me, I did. I sent out during summer. I sent out a list, right, of books that my students need to have for school. And this is a deadline. I put a book out there. Hey, we need to have this book done by this time, because that was a project. And I ain't talking about a book report, but I'm talking about a project to mentally make them work by hands and mind. So, and then when you're in private school, there's no high demands because they don't take the standardized tests that your public and your charter schools take. They're not privy to taking those tests. They don't have to. They take tests, but not those not the big district tests that mandated by your private and public school. So I think there's more flexibility into what they can read. When you talk about public schools, I mean, yes, there are certain books that you are allowed to teach in that class. Look at Florida, what they're doing. So charter, probably, it depends on what type of school it is, what they are, what their focus is. Like if it's an agriculture school or if it's a music charter, it just depends. But I think that's a big part. You got to find books that students really like to read.
So the kids don't get to, because I feel like I know my kids, they are able to just like go to the library and pick up a book, but it's not their class book that they're required. Like it's not the required reason for the class, I guess. But if they were working on, like I know for my oldest, we get a list. These are the books that we're going to read for the semester. And she always want a copy. So I just go on, in high school. But even in middle school, I still would get a list of the books that we're going to use. And she would want me to order them so she can have her own like hardback. She like, spend all my money up. But that's how she would want them. But she would have her own copy. She didn't want to fight with nobody at the library about no books. She wanted to have her own copy. And so she would have her class, whatever they were reading as a class. And then she might have 2 or 3 books from the library from the school library that she's also reading at the same time. So she's always reading something.
Right, because you probably earlier on in life introduced her to reading. So kids that don't like to read, they're not going to the library and getting an outside read. They don't want to read what they got to read in the classroom.
Fair. They're not. Fair.
So they're not going to get no extra side reading. But to piggyback what you were saying, like I said, going back into the private school, we did a whole class reading. Like I said, their book, every student had to read this book. And there were discussions about it. We just didn't read it and you do a report. Like they got involved. They got into being that character, really connecting with that character, with their personal life. I don't see that when you're in the public school, because you got a standard. You got to cover that standard in a length amount of time. And they don't have time to connect to anything. We got to move on. And if you're talking about a kid that cannot, you're talking about, I'm teaching 6th through 8th grade. You got a kid can't even read on a 2nd grade level.
You got a lot of ground to cover then.
They putting their head down. Or it's a lot of work on the teacher because I got to be in there reading.
Yeah. I have so many other questions now that you said that, but I know.
And then you can't give them a worksheet, old school, with text dependent questions. You got to go put it on the computer so I can read to them. This is the state of
I forgot about that
where we are.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole problem. I agree. It's a whole problem. It's a whole problem.
It's bad.
So what's the solution? Where as instructors or teachers, and it does depend on if you're at private or charter or public school. It does, because you don't, well, with homeschooling, you have more flexibility, but with these different institutions, it just depends on where you are. So if you are at public or charter school as a teacher, I mean, what do you do other than just kind of help the kids that you can help and just pray for the best.
Let me get this out the way. I know we're about to wrap this up. I have taught many kids around the world. Okay. Now this message specifically gonna be for my Black and brown community because that's I'm a mother of one. So, but I've taught many kids all around the world, Indian, Asian, you name it. And I've been in the homes where these kids come home, they're either at tutoring, they're either doing some type of outside activity, but they don't turn on a TV, they don't turn on a phone, they don't turn on anything till they finish that academic or that activity that's going to advance them when I'm talking about like playing the piano or some type of instrument. Okay. So there's something given to them besides coming home, eating snacks that ain't no good for us, watching TV or listen to Pound Town, whatever the rest of the song go. Because they know all that. We need to get back to making our kids read. What's 20 minutes? These kids working for an hour. Yeah. Chinese people got to be in front of the screen learning English, snotty nose and everything.
At one, they got the kid. They propping the kid
with the
up.
headphone.
Yeah, propping the kid up. Yeah, at a very, very young age. Learning English.
I think we're a spoiled society.
Yes, we are.
Yes, absolutely.
So just to sum my piece up, I think we need to get back to, because we've been a people that focus on academics, and I think we need to get back to that.
Yeah. I agree with that. We need to stop focusing on all these other accolades and awards and really get back to the reading. I feel like, at home, I also don't think everybody deserves to pass along. I don't like that concept. You need to master where you are before we get to the next place, but I digress.
That's a whole nother.
Retention.
That's a whole nother next time.
All right, somebody closes out.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Realtors of Atlanta. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye.
We got the queens in the house, y'all. Real teachers of Atlanta. We got the queens in the house, y'all.